They weren't the greatest friends to have. In fact, they weren't really friends at all. Just some neighbor kids. They'd teased him about what he had said that he'd seen in the shack near the River Bend train tracks. The tracks themselves were not used by trains, but the folk that desired adventures to places stuck in time. The track was littered with trash and decayed luggage from some forgotten train derailment in 1954. Why it was still there and not taken care of was anyone's guess, though most like to think it's become a local attraction. Someone Barry had seen there the other day had left quite an impression. Though the interaction was short and not at all a physical encounter, it was a terrifying one. Barry was riding his bike around the neighborhood. He made his way to the farther reaches of the block. This, of course, is not where he is used to riding. No, this is new territory to him. This is something Mother would ground him for if she ever found out. However, today he was feeling rather defiant and wanted to be able to talk about something other than how his mother had made him watch daytime drama or how he raced a wooden car last month and won the little derby. No, this was time for him to make a change. This was... Barry slows his bike to a crawl, his attention at the tree line to his left. The deep, dense woods no one was supposed to go into, or at least that's what his mother had always told him, lies just feet away. That's not what caused him to slow down. He heard someone. It sounded like... It didn't sound right to him. Off-putting in an alarming and distressful way. He comes to a halt in the middle of the tree lines. Down a ways he can see what he thinks to be a cabin or a shack of sorts. The path itself, smooth and often traveled. No need for alarm. The voice was probably from someone's house a ways back. Wouldn't be the first time. Barry convinced himself that he'd take a look, then head to the other end of the neighborhood to finish his journey. The right way, of course. After all, if he was going to get grounded, this had to be worth it. He swings his leg around the seat and stands next to the bike for a moment before he walks into the grass. Pine cones and those pointy bits of grass that lay in heaps as far as the eye can see. The trees were tall enough, or rather Barry was short enough that the bottom of the branches hadn't touched him. Barry determined it's okay to ride his bike on the current terrain. He had, sadly, underestimated the distance of the structure and was more than happy he had his trusty bike with him. Someone said something very close to him, the abruptness causing him to nearly crash his bike. He was within walking distance of the old cabin now, and it surely had to have come from there, or so he thought. It was tucked away neatly off the light brown trail, the setting sun's light making it more dramatic than necessary. He turns his bike around facing the way he had come, and puts the kickstand down. It was intimidating, and anyone would admit that. Not that Barry cared. He was doing this for him. Well, mostly for him. He begins walking toward the front door, though the door is missing. The threshold of the door sits agape. A black figure stands in the opening near the door of the cabin, only visible from where Barry had been standing. Barry stops in perfect view of the doorway. He stares in a panic, not knowing what to do. "Hello?" Barry yells out to the person. Barry's heart sinks into his chest. His instincts telling him to sprint the other way kicks in. He feels the hair go up on end. Barry takes a shaky step backwards as the person seems to slump on forward, similar to how a drunk would wobble. Are you okay?" It looked as though the person was about to fall flat on their face just as they spoke.
"Don't let me get you."
The loud, hysterical fueled scream rips Barry's ears apart. Barry full sprints back to his bike and pedals as fast as he can. He looks behind him after pedaling a while. The person is in full sprint behind him, getting closer by the inch. Barry couldn't make out the details. All he could see was the red blood that covered them. The dark metallic spots that appeared everywhere were left to the imagination. Not that he took the time to really study his pursuer. He was more concerned that the trail he had taken had now changed. There was no beginning that he could see. There was no street, no houses far off in the distance. It was just the light brown path that seemed to go on forever. The laughing anger that followed him was getting more aggressive. The voice carried the hatred and malevolence of a demon cursed to the heavens. It felt as if any second Barry would be ripped from his bike and dragged down to the depths of hell. The ground beneath him became soft like sand. His front wheel cocks to the side, sending him over the handlebars face first. His face takes the entire blow, cracking his nose to the left, flush with his face. A small rock had managed to embed itself into his forehead, just enough to make a stream of red leak from his face. The burning pain rushed through Barry's body, releasing the ocean of tears, his wails echoing throughout the woods. It felt like forever, and by now, he surely had been taken. Barry wills himself to roll over and look back, the sun still shining the bright orange light onto his blood-reddened face. However, the thing chasing him was not near him. It was standing about 25 yards away, staring Barry down with the unseen eyes. In its arms was a child about the age of Barry. The child's eyes were heavy, as if they had not slept in a millennia. In a way, it looked as if the child was sleepwalking. The thing raised the child's arm out to the side, as if to point at something. Barry sees the child trying to say something, their lips trembling as they try to form words. Before the child can speak, the thing squeezes the arm, sinking its hand-like claws into the skin, much like a skewer puncturing the skin of a fresh-baked turkey. The claws slide toward the child's chest, bringing the meat from the arm with it, the bone exposed to the elements. The child breaks from the trance and lets out a howl of anguish, flailing at the monster holding them, their arm looking like a chewed-up piece of beef jerky with a dirty toothpick holding it together. The meat dangling to their side like a ripped sleeve. Barry's heart almost bursting in his chest from fright. His whole body shook with fear as he attempted to scoot himself farther away from the monster. It could feel the fear raiding off little Barry. The child sees him. For a moment they made eye contact. In that brief time, while inhaling between screams, the screams were like nails on a chalkboard, piercing and utterly hellish to hear. It had not helped that the monster holding the fenceless child was now bending the bone of the arm. The snap was brutal, making the child shriek in agony, its arm now disconnected from the rest of him. The thing dropped its arm to the ground. Barry was trying to get to his feet, but was nearly petrified by what he had just witnessed. He wanted to puke, to run far from this nightmare. It wasn't his place to play hero. He was just a child who wanted to find a small adventure and a memorable moment to share. His head rang as the child continued to scream. If there was a house in the distance, they had to have surely called the police by now. No sane person wouldn't call after hearing that. Barry gets to his feet and shuffles to his bike, blood dripping from the child's head. Just as Barry is about to start pedaling away, the blood-covered monster grabs the face of the child. The child calling for their mommy, pleading for them to come and save them. That they didn't want the boogeyman to take them away, that they would be better. The cries were abruptly silenced by a wet, sloshing crack. Barry looks back as he pedals to see the monster tearing away the child's jaw. the eyes convulsing in spasms as they flickered to an egg white, blood pouring in heaps over the torso. Barry screams in terror, the adrenaline coursing through him and fueling his escape. The ground was not sand anymore. It was dirt, and it was firm. He pushed and pushed it for as long as he could. He put as much distance as he could between him and that fucking monster. Barry looks back one last time to see the monster just waving him goodbye, as if he'll be greatly missed. The casual nature of the bloody figure mimicking a person raised hairs on the back of his neck. He was far enough away from it, and it had not chased him any further. The path ended suddenly, bringing him back to the road he had originally left. The change was so sudden, he had almost crashed his bike into a fence of one of the houses. He stumbles and falls to the side, catching himself before a hard hit. He rolls to his back and looks around, desperately worried the monster might appear. He looks back down the trail, and there is nothing. The sun becoming smaller by the minute, its light succumbing to the darkness. He feels his face to find no blood, and his nose felt the right way. The pain lingered, though, as if it were phantom. He felt all over, and no blood remained. It was as if he imagined the whole thing. Perhaps he did, though. This was a constant battle with himself. It felt real. The child's cries felt real. As time went on, Barry's curiosity grew to be too much in his young adult years. He searched the internet and found a forum. That forum led him to a list of missing persons cases from the state and county. As fate would have it, a case was found matching the likeness of the child that he had seen. The reality of it all hit him like a wave of bricks. His heart sank into his chest as memories of that night flooded over him. Every step he had taken in the woods was seen vividly in his mind's eye. The blood, the bones snapping, the pain from his accident, all hit him as if he was still there. The tears filled his eyes, as they often did when he thought about that night. He stands up from his computer desk and makes his way to the kitchen. He pours himself a glass of water, spilling a little across the counter from his shaky hands. He sips from his glass as he walks back to the counter. He sits and places the glass next to him, up on a folded-up magazine. He grabs the mouse to click on a web address. Something catches his eye before he clicks. The web address had changed while he was out of the room. Instead of a Google page, the address atop read www.DONSPACE.OU82588.com. It took him a moment to realize what it said. He began screaming at the top of his lungs when he read the numbers 82588. That was the date the incident happened. August 25th, 1988. The pages opened in his browser, closing one by one until a single black background sits on a screen. Barry rolls himself back in the chair away from the screen. In the reflection of the screen, he sees the figure of someone calmly waving at him. His chair stops abruptly in the middle of the room. Something sits in front of the wheels. The coldest chill runs down Barry's spine as a voice whispers,